Chapter 1. The Fish Farmer, the Squire, and the Goblin Caravel. The punch connected. A tooth flew from the man's mouth and into the raucous crowd of onlookers. The man stumbled, his foot hitting an errant rock in the fighting circle, and he regained his balance. Just as he did, he took another hit, and the crowd cheered again. Kargin El Tomath, the prince of the El Tomath kingdom, swung his fist again, connecting a third right hook. His opponent fell hard, and most let out a cheer, while some grew frustrated and handed over the money they lost gambling. Kargin won his wrestling fights against the other squires often. He had never been in a real battle with a long sword and shield, but like other squires, he trained. The crowd consisted of other fighters who were also knighthood squire candidates, and various people who lived in El Tomath Keep. The squires were young men who dreamed of riding on horseback into battle, trouncing ogre and dragon, defending women, and being heroes to children. The knighthood of El Tomath was strong, and the citizens of the kingdom suffered desperation and poverty from the famine. The upper echelons of society still thrived, though. Common folk were angry with the royal family and the wealthy elite. They blamed them for the starvation that swept the land. But the military remained in favor with the people. Joining meant not having to worry about food, land, or services being paid for. "The kingdom shall always provide" was a common phrase repeated by King Sebastian El Tomath. And provide the kingdom did, but it seemed the only ones provided for were those not in need. Mothers and fathers encouraged their sons to join the knighthood and their daughters to marry knights. The position of a knight carried commanded respect and awe, and offered a life free of money problems. El Tomath Keep itself was an imposing structure that made up what locals called Gemmeroth. The town of Gemmeroth itself sat behind the keep. The main gates of the keep didn't face the town, but instead the opposite direction, opening into rolling hills covered in grass that went for miles. The belief was that the keep would keep back its people as a sign of trust in the people. The people said that the royal family used it as just another way to ignore them. It was a constant argument between the royals and the common folk. The people called all of it, both the town and the keep, Gemmeroth, named after the nearby Gemmeroth River. The royals hated this and insisted that not just the keep, but Gemmeroth proper, be called El Tomath Keep. No commoner called Gemmeroth that, and no royal referred to Gemmeroth as anything but El Tomath Keep. The town of Gemmeroth held hundreds of souls, and with the addition of nearby villages like Medrath and Alamir, the number of people was well over 1,000. The keep itself housed hundreds of people, like the royal family and extended family, stable boys, trade merchants, well-connected families, and a good portion of the El Tomath knighthood. The keep had multiple stables, the Singing Fields Inn, a merchant trade area, a few small shops, and a blacksmith and farm homes that were just outside of the walls. The squires fighting and wrestling was a constant source of entertainment for the people. Kargin caught the eye of a woman who had been watching. He left the fighting circle as two new combatants entered and began brawling. "What's your name?" Kargin asked, eyeing the woman's figure as he approached her. The prince didn't do well at hiding his intentions. "Asandria, my lord," she replied, biting her lips slightly and smiling shyly at the prince. Many women threw themselves at Kargin, all hoping to marry into the royal family. "Asandria, would you like to go somewhere warmer, out of this cold air?" Kargin asked, smiling. People milled about around them through the courtyard of the keep. "Somewhere more private?" "Yes, my lord," Asandria said. Often called paladins, the Knights of El Tomath were a strict order who worshipped Tenlora, the good god of sun, life, and justice. The knights were ferocious in battle, known to use holy endurance to heal injuries with divine spells, and to mysteriously call a weapon to their empty and waiting hands they called war blades. The Knights of El Tomath were virtual war machines. To face one in battle was something no one took lightly. Over 900 years ago, King Oswald de Arndt decreed that a geographic mapping and recording of all known history was to commence. This project consumed most of de Arndt's life. He was eventually overthrown by Yellowmackay El Tomath. The Arndt lands had become El Tomath lands, and Yellowmackay El Tomath was crowned king. The El Tomath kingdom was made up of the towns of Gemmeroth, Medrath, Alamir, and extended north across Par Bay all the way to the busy city Peregrine. Yellowmackay's reign lasted almost 50 years. He died and was laid to rest at the top of a distant mountain peak. His heir, Linus El Tomath, succeeded him, as did Linus's heir, and his heir, and his heir. After many generations, Bram El Tomath died, and his son Sebastian had been crowned king. Sebastian had his own son who would one day be king. Hours later, Kargin El Tomath and the woman were getting dressed in a dirty horse stable in the livestock barns. The prince pulled his boots on. The woman still struggled with finding her dress in the pile of hay they had lain in together. "Well, good day to you, then," Kargin said, walking out of the barn and leaving her like he had so many before her. Later that evening, Kargin found himself not dealing with one of the other squires or a naive young woman, but instead someone far more important. "It's not fair," Kargin said, spitting as he stomped in anger and caused a maidservant to drop a goblet on the floor of the royal dining hall. The goblet rolled and finally rested against the lip of a gold-trimmed red throw rug. The woman scrambled to find something to clean up the spilled drink. Kargin was furious. "What you think is fair doesn't concern me. I can't have our men believing that the prince gets a free pass into the army. The next thing you know, the louts will be complaining about you moving up in rank just because you're my son," King Sebastian El Tomath said. Kargin started to speak, but was interrupted by the king. "Where does that leave me? Where? I have people begging to join the knighthood because of this damn famine, but we run scarce on iron for arms as well. Were I to just outfit you, I would be questioned as to why I am arming the inexperienced when there are able men at the ready. The things my men face, your simple longsword would not do." The squire prince was furious and found himself interrupted yet again. "I sit on this throne because people believe in me, and they believe in me because I withstood the trials and learned real honor. You will do the same," Sebastian said. The king adjusted himself in his seat at the long table made of cherry tree wood. Delicacies from all across the continent of Narantoth were offered at the table. Roasted fowl, barbecued boar, the freshest fruits of the Kell forest to the north, and the crunchiest and choicest of vegetables from the farms surrounding El Tomath Keep were served. While most in the kingdom starved, rationing in the keep had not yet started. The king had been dealing with the desperate insurgents and angry common folk. The last 6 months had been hard. He had no desire to add to his problems. "Why do we need honor to even be a part of the knighthood? Just let me take the trial and be done. I want my warblade. I don't see the point in—" "Enough! You have not earned your warblade," Sebastian said, his face turning red and contrasting with his bright white eyebrows, long hair, and beard. The king was a large man, standing well over 7 feet tall. The local legend was that he once threw a fully grown and starving tiger across the Gemaroth River directly into a live boar, killing the boar instantly and providing a life-saving meal for the tiger. He was one of the strongest men that the nearby villages had ever seen. Kargin wasn't as tall as his father, but was still a sight to behold. Over 6 feet, lean and muscular, he was the exact image of his father, but younger, and his reddish-brown beard was just starting to fill in. His eyes were a chestnut brown, and always had a slight judgmental squint to them. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. The king hated defiance above all else. "You may be my son, but I am king. You would do well to remember that, boy. I have neither the time nor the patience to deal with insolent soldiers whining about the prince getting a free ride into the knighthood without having to follow the same protocols. You will learn to follow orders, you will take the honor quest, or you will be broken." Father and son stood silent, watching one another for a moment and waiting to see which would give in first. It was an intense moment that made all of the servants in the dining hall uncomfortable. "Fine," Kargin said after what seemed like an eternity of bitter silence. Crossing his arms and looking down at the floor, he composed himself. "Can I at least have some money for tonight?" "For what? More whores from Medrath? Really? More of that awful dwarven piss they call whiskey?" the king said, rolling his eyes and taking a handful of grapes from a platter. "Well, yeah," Kargin said, shrugging his shoulders. King Sebastian El Tomath stared at his son and shook his head slowly for a moment. "Damn it, whatever," Sebastian finally said. "Take it from the coffer. Remember, you leave in the morning for Alamir, blizzard or not, and I won't hear another word about the matter." Kargin woke from his slumber and rolled over. He glanced at the fireplace of his room. The manservant had loaded pine into it rather than walnut. Pine always burned hotter and was usually reserved for building structures. It didn't matter. Kargin couldn't sleep despite the heat. The issue had been settled. He would be leaving the next day to begin his quest to Alamir. His father was hard on him. Kargin understood, even though he disagreed. Were the king to go easy on Kargin, the other knights would never let the prince live it down. They already didn't like him as it was. While they admired and respected King Sebastian, Kargin was well aware of the gossip. They viewed him as spoiled, entitled, and lazy. They said he only cared to use his royal station for securing women to spend the night with. This bothered Kargin, but he understood. He was a prince after all, and princes were entitled to many things common folk weren't. He rose from the bed, wiped sweat from his brow, and stepped to the window, pulling the curtains aside. "Get up," he said sternly. The woman slept. "Get up," he said again, this time grabbing a clay pitcher of cold water from the bedside table and dousing her in the face as she slept. "Gah! What? What the hell? What are you doing, you fool?" the soaked woman shouted, quickly sitting up. "Watch how you speak. Your money is on the table. Leave," Kargin demanded. Eyeing the fat and heavy leather pouch with gold coins tumbling out of it, the woman stood and cast an angry glance at the prince. She inspected her earnings. Satisfied, she began to put the clothes on. Kargin ignored her as she left and went back to staring out at the cold night sky. He wasn't sure which was worse, the idea of traveling through the winter cold or the sweltering heat of the fireplace. Likely neither. No, the worst thing was the honor quest itself. Kargin still wished he could skip the trials for acceptance into the knighthood instead of wasting time on dealing with bandits and stolen tax monies owed to the kingdom. The idea of an honor quest seemed pointless, and he had no desire to deal with the poor and weak fish farmers of Alamir. The fishmonger village brought in goods to the kingdom from fishing and exports. With the famine, it became one of the most important places in the local region over the last month. Kargin understood why he was needed to go there, but he didn't like the idea of simple meals and cold nights in drafty inns, or worse, barns. The sun rose, but storm clouds covered it. Winter had already set in. The sky was soupy gray, and the wind was picking up. The inner workings of the keep were busy. Knights marched to their next orders, trade merchants pushed their wares onto customers, and a few priests of the knighthood pointed at the sky, whispering ominous warnings. "My lord, your steed is ready," the stable boy said to Kargin as the prince glanced at the streets of the El Tomath keep toward two attractive and young women near his age. "It's about time," Kargin said at the interruption, staring at the boy's shoes, which were full of holes and rips. "Sir, your steed is ready," the boy said again, a small bit of hope splashing his face. Kargin continued to look at the shoes and then put 2 coins in the boy's hand and watched him run. At mid-morning, Kargin's breath poured from his mouth and nostrils as if he were a dragon. Pulling his wool cloak closer around him, Kargin shivered. The cold air showed no mercy, and the dry tundra of the El Tomath lands held no remorse for the prince. The horse stepped to and fro, ready to move on and find shelter from the snowstorm. Kargin traveled for 2 days before the storm had hit. He was prepared with warm furs and his cloak, but feared what the cold would do to the horse. He expected the blizzard to be bad, but not this bad. Ahead, he saw smoke rising from chimneys in Alamir. Blowing a harder than usual gust, Kargin felt the winter air creep in at his neck. He pressed forward. The horse carried both Kargin and his gear, and would need to rest soon. Kargin carried a long sword and battered wooden shield. He kept a dagger in his boot for good measure, and his helm was adorned with a replica of his princely crown. The squire prince's pack contained a change of clothes. He wore scale mail and a white tabard with gold trim. In the center of the tabard was the El Tomath crest. The crest consisted of a large tiger ready to defend itself. Getting worse by the hour, the storm raged before Kargin could get to shelter. He traveled through the storm for hours. Alamir wasn't far now, but night fell. He soon found himself stuck in the middle of the whiteout. Every direction he looked, he saw nothing but white. Within moments, he felt lost and began to worry. Kargin couldn't tell which way to go. Everywhere was white. Stopping in its tracks, the horse began stomping and acting nervous. "Easy, easy," Kargin said to the horse. Kicking its front legs high and nearly throwing Kargin off, the squire struggled for control. "Whoa!" he yelled. The horse began shuffling side to side. Kargin saw them. Only a few feet ahead were snow wolves. 3 in total, and each stood as high as a man's chest. Kargin dismounted and pulled out his longsword. The wolves began to circle him. He thought back to his training with his older cousin, Felipe El Tomath. The wolves pounced. 2 of them jumped at Kargin, while the other nipped at the horse's legs. The squire prince swung his sword, slicing one of the white canines across the face, blinding it. The wolf ran off into the white with a yipe. Kargin was alone. No wolves, no horse, just white. He tried to whistle for the horse, but it was pointless. The wind was loud. Kargin pulled his shield off his back and slowly turned circles, unsure of what to expect. The wolf hit him from behind, taking him down face first in the snow. It bit at the back of his neck. Kargin's wool cloak was the only thing that saved him from instant death. The squire struggled and rolled, throwing the wolf to the side. Kargin scrambled to his feet, and the wolf pounced again. He swung his offhand, crashing the shield into the wolf's face. The beast stumbled and regained its balance. Just like the wrestling fights in the keep courtyard, Kargin swung again, connecting a second time. Before the wolf could right itself again, Kargin swung a third time, hitting it even harder. The wolf yiped and vanished into the white. "Is anyone there? Help! Anyone!" he yelled into the white. Nothing. Kargin began slowly walking forward. He wasn't sure if against the wind was the right direction or not. Just when he tried to determine if it was, the wind seemed to blow from every direction. A wolf bit into his leg. The Squire Prince was caught by surprise, but reacted quickly. He brought the point of his blade down through the skull of the wolf. Were it not for his scale mail armor, the fight would have been over, and Kargin would be dead. Kargin tried to catch his breath and was afraid. That was just one. He knew there was at least one more wolf, and maybe more he had not yet encountered. If more than one pounced, he wouldn't win. The wind calmed for just a moment, and he thought he saw some sort of movement. Then he lost it when the wind started again.
"Hello?"
he shouted. Nothing. Kargin looked around and knew he would not live through the night out in the storm. There it was again, the movement. Kargin readied himself. The cold might kill him, but he would be damned if these wolves did first.
"Come on!"
yelled the man over the storm. A skinny, balding fellow struggled through the snow, walking with Kargin's horse to meet him.